Hello there, listening audience. This is Michael Cross here with another episode of Unlock the Door Radio, where we like to ask the questions that are rarely asked in mainstream media. Tonight, we have a really special guest. Her name's Robin Gerber, and among other things, whether it be motivational speaking or writing books, I was caught by a book that she wrote a couple years ago called Barbie and Ruth. And the interesting thing is that, Barbie, the Barbie doll, is essentially a part of Americana, like Norman Rockwell or apple pie, but it's not always been that way. And so let's find out what happened to make it such a huge phenomenon. Hello, Robin.
Hello. Good morning.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about your book. It deals not just with the Barbie doll, but also the marketing strategies.
Yes, well, actually, it is the first biography of a woman named Ruth Handler, who should be better known than she is. But Ruth Handler, who was the child of immigrants to America, she actually founded the company Mattel Toys. Her husband was the designer, and she was the marketing person and the CEO. And they started that company in 1945, right after the war. Most of the toys they made were musical toys, guns, that kind of thing in the 40s and 50s. But Ruth had one idea for a doll. And she wanted them to make this doll. The men in the design department thought it was a very bad idea, but she said, I want an adult doll. Little girls don't have adult dolls. They only have baby dolls. And they really need a doll to help them play as if they were adult women. And she noticed this because she watched her daughter play and saw how much the little girls wanted to play at being big girls. So she asked the men to design this doll. They absolutely couldn't figure it out. They said no mother would buy her daughter a doll with breasts, and so they refused to make this doll. But finally, in the late 50s, she went on a trip to Europe and saw a doll similar to what you think of as a Barbie doll, which Barbie, of course, is a global phenomenon. And she saw this doll called the Lily doll in Germany. It had originally started life as a sex toy. And she said, this is the doll I want to make for little girls in America. She bought several of the dolls and brought them back and ordered the engineering department to make a doll very similar to that doll. And that's how Barbie was first made.
Okay, it sounds like she was a real go-getter, kind of a, we see these shows, like my wife loves the TV series Mad Men. So this is kind of that same era then.
Yes, it's exactly the same era because she was developing the doll in the late 1950s, precisely the same time. And while she had her design department over in Japan, which is where the manufacturing was happening, she had them over there designing this little plastic doll, and plastics were still being developed, so it was not easy at that time to make plastics that were very tiny and well designed. So that was happening in Japan. She was having the little clothes made, handmade by women, Japanese women who were actually working in sweatshop kind of conditions, I'm afraid. But she had another problem, which was, what if the men were right? What if mothers wouldn't buy their daughters dolls with breasts? She was quite concerned about whether this doll would actually sell. It was her baby, after all. It was the only toy she ever came up with. So she had an idea to hire one of these newfangled psychologists who marketed themselves as marketing people. And so she found this man, Ernest Victor. Now, he himself had come from Germany, and he'd studied with Freud. And he brought these ideas to America and had the very entrepreneurial idea himself that rather than treating individual patients, he could help corporations sell their products through psychology. And he was getting quite well known for this. In fact, in a way, he was notorious because there was a real backlash against this idea that you manipulate people's emotions in order to sell products. But nevertheless, Ruth hired him, and he started doing focus groups. we're very familiar with those now, but back then that was quite a revolutionary idea. And so he brought a bunch of mothers in with daughters and said, here's this doll. What could encourage you to buy this doll? And figured out that what mothers were really concerned about was their daughters' hygiene. And, they wanted their daughters to care about how they look. And in fact, Mad Men's a good example. If any of your listeners have watched that show, the mother who's married to the main character is very much concerned about how her daughter looks. And so Ernest Victor came back to Ruth Handler and said, you should market this doll as a fashion model. Because after all, fashion models always care about how they look, and they're well-groomed. And this way, the mothers will feel like they're doing something good for their daughters by buying them this doll that will encourage them in their good grooming habits. So that was how she did end up marketing the doll.
Okay. For our listening audience, I encourage people to look up something about Ernest Victor because he was actually quite influential. I mean, he's even the one responsible for the shape of lipstick applicators, isn't he?
Yes, the idea that shaping lipstick in a phallic-looking sort of container would subliminally, or perhaps not so subliminally, encourage women to buy it. So he did similar things with the design of cars and the marketing of cars. So market cars is something that was sexually connected and would make you a more attractive man to women if you bought this car. So he really changed the discussion about products from the utility of a product to the emotional viability of a product, the way in which it could make you feel better. Mm-hmm. Buy this, it'll make you happier. Buy this, it'll make you feel better. We're so familiar with this now, it doesn't even sound like a big deal, but at the time it was really quite revolutionary to stop marketing a product for its utility.
Yeah.
So, in fact, he was the book, Vance Packard's book, The Hidden Persuaders, which came out around this time, or maybe it might have been the early 60s, that was a reaction to Victor himself and others like him who were seen as nefarious in the way that they were promoting products, not as the product, but as something that would, help you psychologically.
Yeah, it's really amazing that, he was a student of Freud, and then Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, they're the ones that kind of got all this modern day marketing going, but poor Freud, he hardly, he barely had enough to kind of survive on throughout his years. He never was rich. He made a lot of other people. This made Victor was a rich man. Absolutely. This corporations had money to spend, and once they saw that this was something that was working, he was quite in demand. Ruth didn't discover him. He had already been discovered. But the fact that she used him was indicative of the kind of entrepreneur she was. She was very forward-thinking. Well, I read one article that said that originally even fathers were a little bit hesitant to buy such an anatomically correct doll. And they, too, went into the idea that this doll could help their daughters learn how to dress right, groom right, and then be able to find Mr. Right someday and get married. This being the 1950s.
Yeah.
And
in fact, that very first television commercial for the Barbie doll, which you can see online, if you look up Barbie doll first commercial, has her in a wedding dress getting married. It shows her in different outfits, but with a wonderful song in the background about how beautiful she is. And then in one of the transitions, she is wearing a wedding dress. So the message isn't terribly subtle. Now, what's interesting is that when Ruth unveiled this doll, all new toys are unveiled at something called Toy Fair, which happens in March in New York. And the toys are put on display, and in those days, the big buyers, which Sears was the biggest, they would come and look at the toys and order what they wanted. And the Barbie doll was completely ignored. She had virtually no orders at Toy Fair, and she was devastated. She went into her hotel room and cried, which is not something she did very often. And then she called Japan and stopped production because she was sure that she had made a huge mistake. And this was going to cost her a lot of money. But the ads started running after March, and little girls were watching the ads. And then come the end of May, beginning of June, school is out, children want toys to play with for the summer, and suddenly the Barbie doll started flying off the shelves, and that first year they sold 300,000 dolls. So I think it really proved that Victor's ads were the powerful engine, because the male buyers at Toy Fair did not get it at all. They did not see the toy would sell.
Well, this gets into kind of that Freudian thing because you know, you get people ranging from some feminist to some church groups, and I've even heard something about like groups in Iran who have said that, well, the Barbie doll is too explicit and it's too grown up and that little girls are being brainwashed. But my understanding is that what appealed to girls was like this subconscious desire that Victor noticed too, that they had a desire to be more grown up, that if the dolls had just been a replica of what had been coming along ever since then, it's not appealing to their vision of themselves 10 or 15 years down the road. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, Ruth nailed it, as we say. She said little girls just want to play at being big girls. And I've done many, many interviews about the book, and people have called in and only a handful say, you know, the body image thing is a problem. By far, people call in and say, I loved my Barbie doll because I could pretend to be anything I wanted. I really wanted to be an engineer. I really wanted to be, you know, an artist, whatever it was. I could pretend to be that with this adult doll. With a baby doll, there's only one thing to do. Take care of the baby. And there's only one role, the mother role. So Ruth saw that this had what she called play value, and that Mattel was all about creating toys that had play value, meaning a continuing ability for the child to play with it. And, of course, Barbie was kind of the ultimate creation in that way, because there's still 3 dolls sold every 2 seconds or something.
Mm-hmm. Where did Ken come into all this?
Well, after the doll came out, they started getting letters saying, we want her to have a boyfriend. You know, she was a real adult doll, and one of the things the girls were thinking about was, well, she's a teenage fashion model, she'd have a boyfriend. So that's how they created Ken.
Okay. But since it was America, they couldn't make him quite as anatomically correct.
Yeah, that was a pretty big debate. And it was quite a devastating one for the real Ken, who was her son. Her children were named Barbara and Ken. And to this day, Barbara, who's still alive, she's the only one still alive, does not like to be called Barbie. She only wants to be called Barbara because she found having the doll named after her, she didn't find that very pleasant. And Ken, even less so, because he was even more upset by it because of the teasing, as you can imagine, that he got from the fact that Ken has no anatomy.
Yeah. But
in the crucial places, you know, he's just neutered.
Oh, poor Ken. Yeah, but of course this was around 1960, 61. There's Barbie.
Yeah, it was early 60s, and yeah, I guess it was okay to have breasts, but a penis was a step too far. So.
Okay. Hey, in our remaining, I know you're busy today, and our remaining few minutes, do you think that, I mean, I've heard people make comments that maybe this is, in some way, it's bad for girls in their psychology. They see this image of what they see as maybe Barbie as being the perfect woman. you must have come across lots of research. What do you think about that?
I just think it's not true. They didn't. The doll wasn't really, from what I can tell, the doll for little girls, myself included, by the way. I was born in '52, so I played with Barbie dolls. That most girls didn't see the doll as an extension or as separate from themselves. And this is some ideal separate from me. And it was kind of the opposite. It was, this doll is me. And this is who I'm going to be. And the anatomy of it was rather irrelevant. I don't remember having any thoughts, and I haven't talked to anyone or seen any research that, I haven't seen any good research that showed that this somehow creates some kind of pathology or psychological damage in girls. I think, Ruth was asked this question because she lived till 2002, so this came up for her quite a bit, as you can imagine. And, she was very dismissive of this. She said, this is not a problem in a girl that's going to be created by a doll. If a girl has a bad body image, that has to do with her parenting and, how her parents deal with that. And to me, that's the truth. If you're telling your daughter, as I did mine, that she's beautiful and she's fine and she's perfect the way she is, playing with a doll that's different from her is not going to matter.
Okay.
So that's what I believe. I mean, other people certainly believe strongly another way, but I have not seen any good research. I don't know if you found any.
Well, no, I actually haven't. Hey,
yeah.
How can people find out more about you? You have a website?
I do. It's Robin, R-O-B-I-N, like the bird. Robin Gerber, like the baby food, .com. RobinGerber.com.
Okay, and they can find out more about your speaking as well as your books and that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, the book itself and Ruth Handler's story is being considered for a movie right now, so excited about that. And I hope it happens so more people can learn about her, because she was a tremendous character, an amazing corporate executive, and she had a very dramatic story.
All right. Sounds like she was a real entrepreneur. Okay, well,
yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with my audience.
You're very welcome.
Okay, well, you have a good day now.
Okay, all right, take care, thanks.
Bye.